Well, hello, everybody. My name is Dan Skip Allen, and we are here on a Friday night, about 3 days before Halloween. And this is the final episode of the Top 5 Weekly in our special all month long Halloween month special that I decided to do with these guys. And this time we're going to do our favorite horror films. We did female-led thrillers, then we did monster movies, then we did serial killer films. Now we're going to culminate that all into one big show, our favorite horror movies. This is the last show of October, so we wanted to end it on a bang. And with me, I'm going to introduce my three panelists. Andrew, introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew. I wasn't on last week, unfortunately, but I'm back again this week to wrap up the month of October.
And Robert?
Hey, my name's Robert. I'm glad to be back again. We're talking my favorite subject, horror movies. So I'm excited to see what everybody else has on their list.
And Poe. We got Poe from the Kung Fu Panda movies. Poe.
No. Sorry, guys. It's just me, Stephen Billings.
Oh.
I know. I'm back again. To be honest, the more and more, I usually tell people I'm not a huge fan of horror movies, but the more I think about it, I love horror movies, man. They're fun. They're a fun genre. It's a very wide and complex genre. It can feed its way into a lot of different areas. So it's going to be fun talking about them tonight.
Yeah, as we kind of discussed the last 3 weeks, we kind of separated the horror movie genre and into subgenres, and we're going to cram it all together in one category of our top 5 horror movies. I know we probably all could have come up with top 10 lists, but that would have taken quite a while. So we're going to keep it to what the name of the show is, the top 5. And unlike you guys, I'm not the biggest horror movie fan, but when a horror movie is done great, I will sing it the praises of a horror movie that is done great. And so I am a fan of great horror movies. I'm just not a fan of bad horror movies. And we've had so many bad horror movies over the 40 years that I've been alive. But we've had so many great ones. And this year in particular, what a great year for horror movies. And we have a special question later on, and we're going to might have a little bit of talking about some of this year's horror movies in that special question. So let's get the ball rolling, starting with Andrew. Andrew, what is your number 5 horror movie of all time, or your favorite horror movie of all time, 5th favorite?
My number 5 is going to be a film called The Night of the Hunter, which came out in 1955, directed by actor Charles Lawton, starring Robert Mitchum. And it's a film not a lot of people know about, but I really think they should. It's a very underrated film. It's a very classic film. Robert Mitchum plays this kind of evangelical preacher, but he's so kind of psychotic in his ways that he's also a murderer. So the film is all about these children actually kind of evading him, which is very interesting because children are viewed as these rather innocent victims in the film because, children are very naive, they're very unsuspecting about things, but in this film, they know right away that he is an evil guy, more so than the adults, which is a very interesting theme in horror films. Who can tell who is evil and who can't? So it's one of my personal favorites. Robert Mitchum is one of my personal favorite actors of all time. So it's a great film. I highly recommend it for people.
Yeah, I never heard of it, honest to God. I know, these guys are probably hating me right now, but I never heard of it. So that's great that you're bringing up a film that I never heard of, and I'll have to check out, Andrew. All right, now we're going to go to Robert. Robert, what is your number 5 horror movie?
Okay, I'm bringing some old school American horror from 2006. So this kind of like we weren't having a good year for horror then, but we got Hatchet from director Adam Green, starring Kane Hodder as the corporeal spirit Victor Crowley that just kills people in some of the most brutal ways in horror, and it's really graphic. It's something that it's got a lot of what I look for in a horror movie, and so that's why it's in my number 5.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Robert. Kane Hodder was he the very first Jason Voorhees, or was he one of the Jason Voorhees?
He was one of the Jasons. He wasn't the first.
Okay.
He is the best.
He's the best.
If you are a Jason aficionado, he is the best Jason Voorhees.
Well, just a little glimpse into the 50th episode of the Best Damn Movie Show podcast. There might be a little interview with a Mr. Kane Hodder on there.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's just a glimpse of how big the 50th episode Halloween Spectacular is going to be. It should go up on Monday. So keep a glimpse for that, guys, out there.
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to go to Steven, or otherwise known as Poe. Poe, go ahead.
So, in a way, I feel kind of bad taking this one because I know Robert introduced me to this movie, but I needed to put it on my list because, like him, I really love this movie, and it's from 2006 also, and that's Behind the Mask: The Rise of Leslie Vernon. Basically, my list is gonna kind of cover a few different subgenres of horror. I didn't want to just pick all the same type of horror movies, so this is my comedy horror, and basically, this movie is it's kind of a mockumentary. Basically, you have our main character, Leslie Vernon, who's a aspiring slasher, and he allows this group of college kids to document how he goes about doing his work. And it's a lot of it's a comedy, but then at the end, it turns into a very traditional horror movie, slasher movie. And it's just a really fun movie. The main actor, Nathan Basil, we actually interviewed him not too long ago, so you can check it out on Film Club Central. But he's a cool dude. He still does a lot of Comic-Cons and stuff for the character. And hopefully a sequel is going to be coming soon. Sequel/prequel. So, but you'll hear more about this movie, I'm pretty sure, later. So.
Yeah, I mean, I watched that interview a while ago. You guys did a great job getting him. That was a good get for y'all. All right, so I don't want any crap from you guys because my number 5, my list, I mean, I got some great films on my top horror movie. So I had to put something at number 5. And I'll tell you what, my honorable mentions list is ridiculous. So we're going to go over honorable mentions a little later in the show. But my number 5 is 1978's classic Halloween with Jamie Lee Curtis and Donald Pleasance, directed by John Carpenter. The music, Michael Myers, the Captain Kirk mask, however you slasher film, serial killers. It is, God, this is the greatest serial killer film of all time. But we didn't put it on our list last week because we weren't doing the kind of quote-unquote superpowers. And this guy doesn't die. So we didn't put him on there. But he's technically, in my opinion, the greatest serial killer in movie history. And Jamie Lee Curtis, she got it from her mother. Janet Leigh, she has the scream. The quote-unquote scream queens, Janet Leigh in Psycho, now Jamie Lee Curtis from Halloween, and that scream is heard around the world, and everybody remembers that scream from Halloween. I love the music. That music is just, God, it resonates with me so much. It's just such a great score, and John Carpenter is so good at that, taking the scores and making those scores part of the legend of his films. And I put Halloween at number 5. I know some of y'all will probably have it higher on your list, but I just had a few other ones that I like better than Halloween. But I love Halloween.
You assume too much, Dan.
I assume too much. All right. We're going to go back to Andrew. What is your number 4 horror film?
This is pure coincidence. We didn't plan this, but my number 4 is John Carpenter's Halloween. Just kind of random how this happened to be. I kind of echo most of what Dan said, but I'll also say John Carpenter is a great, great filmmaker. His early work is kind of great pioneering when it comes to independent, low-budget cinema in the 1970s and into the 1980s. And what is interesting is that Halloween wasn't really a big hit at the time. It's kind of grown over the years. And what is interesting is that song, that iconic song. I think people hear that song before they even watch the movie. I know I did. I remember hearing someone's ringtone in a store one time of the Halloween theme, and that's how iconic it is. And Michael Myers is one of those characters that is kind of iconic when it comes to the horror genre. Jamie Lee Curtis is a scream queen. Donald Pleasance was a kind of a very solid, great veteran actor at the time. It's very interesting how he kind of played the character of Dr. Loomis over the years, basically until he passed away. Also, he got his name from one of the characters in Psycho, which is very interesting kind of connection there with Janet Leigh and Jamie Lee Curtis, the mother-daughter connection. So it's a great classic film. I put it at my number 4 because there are 3 films ahead of it that I just happen to like more as horror films. But this one for me is important to me because it was also the film that got me into the horror franchise or the horror genre.
Well, I mean, I watched Hitchcock films before Halloween, but oh god, that movie when I was a kid, wow, I just loved that film. So that was basically the modern day horror film that got me involved in watching horror films. All right, Robert, what's your number 4?
Okay, I'm coming out of 1988 with Friday the 13th Part 7. Now I know there were way too many sequels for these movies, but I feel like this one is very underrated. It has, if you go on a look at lists of some of the best kills Jason's ever had, most of them come from this movie. I mean, you have him beating a woman up against a tree in a sleeping bag. It's so great. Again, Kane Hodder as Jason Voorhees, except no substitute. So that's my number 4.
Yeah, you know, I think I had Friday the 13th, the original, on my honorable mentions list, but I had a feeling some of us would have Friday the 13th films on our top 5. I mean, he's just one of the iconic characters in horror movies. So it was a no-brainer that somebody or more than one of us would have Friday the 13th film on our list. All right, Steven, what is your number 4?
My number 4, this one, I think that, in my opinion, for a long time, the kind of like the iconic horror characters went for a dry spell for a while. Since the 80s, you didn't really get a lot of iconic horror people. But I think in the early 2000s, we finally got one that hit the scene and just really blew up, and they continue to make movies of this. I think another one's coming out next year, and that's Saw, James Wan's first movie. He made a short for it originally, and then they loved it so much they made a feature out of it. And to me, the Jigsaw character just became that big, iconic horror character that we hadn't had in a long time. And spoiler, the twist is one of the best twists of all time. That the bad guy's in the room the whole time. And it's just the way the storytelling is and the direction by James Wan. It's just there's some very frightening images, some very, this is what you would consider torture horror. And there's just some freaky stuff in this movie, some ways that he makes people hurt themselves and he doesn't literally have to hurt them himself. And it's a very interesting character. And but I don't want to give it all away. You should just watch the original Saw.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I absolutely love Saw. It's on my honorable mentions list. Cary Elwes, where the hell was he before? He disappeared before Saw for a while there, and he came back and Saw, and that version was the only version I actually liked. The rest of them, you can throw them all in the trash can for all I care. They're all a bunch of junk.
Basically.
That original concept was great, in my opinion. One time, but they always go back to the well. When something makes money and fans like it, they always go back to the well. So you knew there was going to be a bunch of Saws, and of course, they're going to do the reboot next year, so we'll see what happens. with that. I'm going to go back to a man named John Carpenter. And I had this film on a previous list of mine sometime in September, I believe. We did remakes, and I had this film on our remakes list. But it's just, and I said I might have it on my horror films list. So I kind of, told people a little bit about the future back then. So now I got The Thing. I'll tell you what. Wow. This is the closest thing to like alien abduction kind of alien creepy crawler critters that I can't stand that kind of stuff because that's the one thing that really scares me. Well, this is a creature that takes over people's body, and it's so disgusting. And then you have the cold weather. You have this kind of base out in the middle of Antarctica or wherever, and Kurt Russell is phenomenal in this film. And then it came out in 1982. You got who else you got in here? Wilford Brimley and David Keith, or a couple other guys that are in there. Just such a scary, scary movie and creepy movie. You don't know when something's going to be. God, I just can't even think about The Thing. And of course, I was only 9 years old or something when that came out. So it really scared me a lot when I was a kid. So I had The Thing. I had the double dose of John Carpenter at 5 and 4 on my list. All right, now I alluded to this before we started going down our lists, and I wrote an article earlier in the year, about halfway through the year. Is 2016 the resurgence of the horror movie genre? And I had all these horror movies, and I had a couple good ones on there, and then I talked about a bunch of bad ones. But then since then, we've had a couple really, really good ones. So, because we're not going to do our top 5 horror movies of 2016, I thought, let's talk about our favorite horror movie of 2016. And I'm going to give everybody an opportunity to say, we might see the same one. We might see a different one. Who knows? But I think it deserves being talked about. What a great year 2016 is. It is the resurgence of the horror movie genre. And I'm happy that this genre has come back, because it has been such a bad genre for so many years, whether you like the genre or you don't like the genre. And so I'm going to go to Andrew first. What is your favorite? Tell us why and what it is about this specific film that you think is such a great film, your favorite horror movie of 2016.
My favorite horror movie of 2016, and also kind of one of my favorite films of 2016, is The Witch. It's a film that came out earlier in the year. I consider it a horror film. It's very much so. I am one who really loves kind of slow art house, almost experimental films. So that film fit right into this. It's not a traditional horror film in the sense you don't get a lot of jump scares. It's mostly atmospheric and thematic and stuff like that. It's set back in colonial times, or pre-colonial times, in New England, and it's set in the puritanical settings. So you have this Puritan family who gets actually cast out of a Puritan colony. They're too religious, which sounds kind of crazy for the Puritans, and they are forced to kind of resettle near the woods. And there are kind of these supernatural forces that are emanating from it. And the film is incredibly well shot, great acting performances, and also very unsettling throughout the film, and also flashes of real horror type stuff.
Yeah, The Witch. I didn't love The Witch. I liked The Witch, and I love the period that it took place, and I love the fact that you don't have to have a bunch of blood, a bunch of gore, a bunch of crazy stuff to do something suspenseful and scary. And the young lady in it, the title character of The Witch, she was also in Morgan, which wasn't as good as The Witch. But I have a feeling this girl is going to have a really good career ahead of her. I actually really like her What's her name? You got her name in front of you, Andrew, by any chance?
I don't. I could look it up, but
I forgot her name. I forgot her name, but
Yeah,
I actually
forgot her
liked
name.
her in The Witch. I didn't like her in Morgan. I was really looking forward to Morgan too. Robert, we're gonna go
Andrew
to you.
actually said mine. I really enjoyed The Witch a lot. I don't watch much modern horror anymore for the same reasons you said. Horror just has taken a huge nosedive. There's probably been a few B horror movies that I enjoy, but I think overall I enjoyed The Witch the most this year.
Wow, I thought everybody would pick something different.
Well,
Anna Taylor-Joy is the girl's name.
Oh God, she was so good in that movie. Not so good in Morgan, but I digress. All right, Steven, what's your favorite horror movie of 2016?
It's kind of tough. It was between two. Don't Breathe is a really good one. But the more I thought about it, I think that this other one's probably my favorite, and that's from way back earlier this year also, and that's 10 Cloverfield Lane. I thought Dan Trachtenberg's first movie was just fantastic, and John Goodman alone is terrifying in this film. The concept alone is terrifying, but John Goodman by himself could be a horror movie. Like him just watching you from a distance scared the shit out of me. Like if you he's him just watching you, and it's just like The Witch. It's a lot more atmospherical, and it's in a like The Thing. It's in an enclosed environment, claustrophobic, and and not really knowing what's going on outside builds the tension too. And it's just a really good movie, and I think was better than Cloverfield. And now we're getting a third movie called God Particle that's going to be also in the same universe. So we'll see how that goes. But 10 Cloverfield Lane was just a really awesome, well put together film, and I enjoyed it.
No, I actually love 10 Cloverfield Lane as well. I like The Witch, and 10 Cloverfield Lane. That's one of the ones I was talking about when I said what a great year we've had for horror movies. And I'm shocked that nobody on the panel talked about Conjuring 2 or Lights Out.
I never saw Lights Out, and Conjuring 2 to me was a little bit of a step back from the first one.
I'll tell you what, the thing about, you rarely see a horror movie with a plot, very good storytelling, great acting, and I feel like The Conjuring 2 have all three of those combined, and they create iconic characters that you might see in future movies. The Nun, the Stilt Man, whatever, the
Slender Man,
something Stick Man, the Stick Man,
Slender Man.
Yeah, so you might see these guys in other movies, but the thing is, there was a mystery, and the horror that was going on was real because it really happened to these people. I know Hollywoodizes movies, and I have some inside information about The Conjuring, but not The Conjuring 2, so I can't say. But I have some information about The Conjuring that would probably blow you away. But this actually had a story, as far as I was concerned, and a plot, and a mystery, and that's what was great about it. And you had the Vera Farmiga character. She had to figure this out to save these people. And that's what was great about this movie, because rarely do you have a plot in a story and a really, really good mystery in a horror movie this day and age. And that's what I loved about The Conjuring 2. But you said Don't Breathe, phenomenal. Lights Out, phenomenal. And I could easily make a top 5 list of horror movies of 2016, and it's a legitimate, those are great movies, and they could be on anybody's top 10 list of 2016, like Andrew said. So, all right, well, we shed some light on the 2016 horror movies. We got that out of the way. And now we're going to go back to Andrew. What is your number 3?
My number 3 is another classic film, 1973, The Exorcist, directed by William Friedkin, starring Ellen Burstyn and Max von Sydow. It's a film I only saw a few years ago because I waited years and years to kind of prepare myself for the film. And once I saw it, I was blown away by the story and just how graphic and how amazing the practical effects are in that film. When you watch it and you realize most of this is all practical effects and how they created all the fake blood and all the gore in it, and it was really astonishing. Also, great theme work in the film when you take this kind of angelic girl and possess her, a demon possesses her, and she goes complete 180 to the most grotesque thing you can possibly imagine in the film. A terrific atmosphere in the film as well. It is one of the all-time classics and one of the scariest films of all time on most lists. I know it's one of the most frightening I've seen.
Yeah, Max von Sydow is great. I think he's the priest, right?
Yeah, he's one of the priests.
Yeah, he's really good in that. I'll be honest with you, Andrew. When I watch The Exorcist, and I've watched it a couple times, I just laugh. I just think it's so out of date that I just kind of laugh at it. It's funny to me. And I know that's wrong, and I shouldn't say that. But, yeah, it's so out of date that I just can't – it doesn't scare me. So I apologize for saying that, but I'm glad that
That's okay. That's okay. You can offend me all you want. It's your show.
Oh,
I didn't mean to offend you. I really didn't. All right, Robert. What's your number 3?
all right. Well, this one comes from 1987. In 1987, I was 7 years old and saw 2 horror movies in the theater that year. They were my first 2 horror movies in the theater. My dad was kind of irresponsible. But this one is 1987's Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors. This one coming after part 2, which kind of could have been the downfall of the Freddy's franchise, kind of brought it back, and in my opinion is one of the best ones. It's just under the original. It's pretty much where Freddy got the start of being silly and jokey and toying with his victims a little more than he did in the original. It's got Patricia Arquette in it, probably one of her first movies. And it's just near and dear to my heart. It scared the crap out of me. I was just a little kid, and that's why it's on my list.
Yeah, I got the original Nightmare on Elm Street on my honorable mentions. That first one was definitely a scary film, and I understand why any of those would be scary for a child of your age at the time. Stephen, what is your number 3?
All right, so this is the one on my list where I had a conundrum because I couldn't choose between 2. One of them was Halloween, which, yeah, Halloween is one of the greats. I know it. But then I started to think about it, and now that I've heard 2 people mention Halloween on their list, it made me decide to go the other way. And so I'm going to mention a movie that doesn't get enough credit for being really the movie that introduced kind of the slasher genre tropes to and inspired these movies like Halloween and Freddy and stuff, and that's 1976 Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's that genre, that backwoods redneck movie is just very like I've said on our film club movie show. I live in the South, so that kind of hits home with me. Like, we're living in the woods, and I'm like, there could be a dude with a chainsaw or that eats people and wears their face as a mask could just come in the studio right now. The door's probably unlocked, and could kill me, because people like that around here. And I haven't met one yet, but this film, Tobe Hooper, he also directed Poltergeist, or maybe Spielberg did. We don't really know, but this movie's just got this rawness to it that just makes it scary to me. Like they've remade this movie in, I think, 2003 with Jessica Biel, and they didn't match the rawness. That was the only thing about it. There's a rawness to it where there's like literally a scene where the main girl's chased through the woods for like a good 3 or 4 minutes, and it just feels like you're really there with her. And there's some just frightening sound design. It's a creepy movie, man.
No, I definitely agree. I'll tell you what, I would not want to have any hillbillies in North Carolina with a chainsaw around me, that's for sure.
Well, Robert has a chainsaw, and he is a hillbilly, so you might not want to meet him.
I was kind of picking on you guys because you guys live in the kind of the country over in North Carolina.
Well, I'm not a hillbilly, though. I don't talk like this.
I do.
Oh no, you guys are all good guys. I got when we're talking about monster movies, I talked a little bit about the Wolfman and how much of a fan I am of Lon Chaney and the Wolfman. But I think the one film that really showed that subgenre of monster movies, and of course, monster movies is a subgenre of horror movies, is An American Werewolf in London. I mean, came out in 1982, 1981, and has John Landis as the director and David Naughton and Griffin Dunn. I'll tell you what, this is how you do a werewolf film. And I just love, that's kind of my favorite kind of monster subgenre of monster films. I like vampires and stuff, but I really love werewolves. I got a thing for werewolves, and American Werewolf in London is just an all-time classic. Even though I'm a huge fan of The Wolfman with Lon Chaney, this movie takes it to the next level, and it really made. I don't think we've seen a werewolf movie since. I love The Howling, but it comes a close second to American Werewolf in London. So yeah, I had to put a werewolf movie on my top 5 horror movies, and I picked the best one, I think.
That, to me, Dan, is hands down, still to this day, the greatest werewolf transformation on film.
Yeah, it really is. It's just such a phenomenal. The special effects. I mean, it's once again you have to do the slow motion. You have to do stop, add hair, stop, add hair. So it was like a stop motion kind of thing, and they really made it seamless. So that was what's cool about that.
Are we forgetting about Wes Craven's Cursed? Are we forgetting about that? That is one of the greatest movies ever.
Go away, Steven. Go away.
All right, we're going back to Andrew with number 2.
Number 2. All right, let me see if I can redeem myself in Dan's eyes. I'm going to go with the classic Stanley Kubrick film, The Shining, based on the Stephen King novel. Granted, Kubrick decided to stray far away from the Stephen King novel, which pissed Stephen King off, but is still an all-time classic film, in my opinion, not just horror film. Yet again, another film with a tremendous atmosphere, and it's a slow build or slow descent towards insanity for Jack Nicholson's character, set in the remote hotel in the mountains where you're isolated from society, you're isolated from the world, and you just kind of slowly drip into madness. And the climax of this film is just amazingly chaotic.
Yeah, the Overlook Hotel, the twin girls, just so many different things that were just crazy about that film. And of course, Jack Nicholson, it's one of his most famous roles he's ever portrayed, of course, the huge Johnny, that whole thing.
That was just like him, Dan. That was just like him.
That was just like him.
I tried. I'm a huge Jack Nicholson fan, and that's, God, I love that film. And that, once again, is on my honorable mentions. I told you I could have come up with a list of 10 easily, But, all right, we're going to go back to Robert. What's your number 2?
Okay, Steven has already named my number 2. He should have put it higher on his list, in my opinion. And that's Behind the Mask, Rise of Leslie Vernon from 2006, written by David Stevie and starring Nathan Basil, directed by Scott Glosserman. To me, it is the most original horror movie ever made. It takes horror and flips it over on its head and plays with all the tropes that we all love to make fun of in horror movies. Like, why did you do that? Don't go up the stairs, And the job this was the first movie Nathan Basil did, and I think he did such a wonderful job. And I feel like he's an underappreciated actor. I feel like he could do more. When I first saw this movie, I was blown away, and I've done my best to tell everyone about it that I see, because I feel like it doesn't get enough credit.
Yeah, I'm definitely, all the talk we've had about that, I definitely have to see that film. And, just don't be afraid. don't be scared if I bash it to you guys.
Hey, no problem, no problem. It's a very smart movie. It's not it's not stupid or dumbed down. It's a thinking man's movie.
All right,
Um,
well, that's good then. All right, Steven, what's your number 2?
Well, out of all the movies on my list, I feel like that there's some of you are gonna agree with me on this one. Some of you, I know Robert agrees with me. But the more I started to think about this movie, I was like, I've always thought of this movie as a horror movie, and some people don't agree. I've had arguments in film club about this, but if you think about the plot, it is definitely a horror movie, and that is Arnold Schwarzenegger's Terminator. James Cameron. If you think about the plot, it is literally a slasher movie, basically. You have a robot being sent from the future to kill one person, and through the whole movie, he's stalking Sarah Connor, and he can't find the right one. He just keeps carrying every Sarah Connor he comes across till he finds the right one. And then also Kyle Reese is sent back to protect her. And it's there's some, great violence like a horror movie, there's a scene of Arnold Schwarzenegger taking out his own eye, which it was awful effects at the time, but still very horror movie like. And it's, at the end of the movie, when you finally get that final scene with the Terminator's skin is all off of his body and it's just the robot, it's terrifying. It terrified me as a kid. And it's in the soundtrack. Listen to the soundtrack. That is a horror movie soundtrack. So I'm going to keep defending Terminator as being a horror sci-fi.
No, I mean, that is a subgenre of horror. Sci-fi horror is a subgenre of horror. And you definitely could argue that Terminator, Predator, those are horror movies, even though they're sci-fi horror.
Well, I get a lot of people that are like, no, that's an action movie. And I'm like, yeah, there's action in it.
Yeah. But I agree. I mean, it's your personal list. This is what's great about the Top 5 show is I get guests on here, and I know a lot of the times the guests are Andrew and Steven, but I want you guys to personalize your own list that make a difference to you, things that resonate in your life, in your world, whatever crazy worlds you guys live in. But no, I'm just kidding.
Dan, you're such a Democrat. Thank you. You could run for president.
No, that's what this is. When I talked to you, Steven, about doing the show, I wanted it to be fun. I want to get all kinds of people on the show and I want them to personalize their list for whatever reason they want. So I'm never going to criticize. I know I said I didn't like The Exorcist, but it doesn't mean I didn't appreciate that is something that resonates with Andrew. And I don't agree as far as that Terminator is one of the greatest horror films, but that's your personal list. So I can't judge you for what you think is great to you.
I don't see my list is not based on what I think is the best. I'm basing it on my favorite.
Oh yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Whatever reasoning you use, it's your reasoning. It's your thought process. I mean, and then I'm going to use a movie that I had on last week's. We did Serial Killer, and somebody and a couple of you guys had it on your number one of your female-led thrillers. I feel like it's one of the greatest horror movies of all time, if not the greatest, except for I just thought of something that was better to me, something that was scarier to me, as my number one. So I had to put this great Oscar-winning film at number 2 with performance by Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins, and that's Silence of the Lambs. I mean, Buffalo Bill, and you had all these crazy stuff going on, and it's just such a great film directed by Jonathan Demme. It came out in 1991, and it won a bunch of Oscars: Best Picture, Best Supporting Actress. I think, did she win Best Actress or Best Supporting, Jodie Foster?
Best Actress.
Best Actress. Anthony Hopkins won Best. Did he win Best Actor?
Yeah.
Wow, for 8 minutes of screen time, I think he was on, or something like that. But 8-10 minutes or something. but I had to put The Silence of the Lambs. If I wouldn't be doing justice to myself if I didn't put The Silence of the Lambs on my list as one of the greatest horror movies of all time, and I feel like it is. Other people may not disagree. They may look at it as a thriller or a suspense thriller or a mystery or whatever. But you could put it, it fits into so many genres within the horror movie genre, but bottom line, it's one of the greatest, in my opinion. So I had to put it on there. So now we're going to ask Andrew, do you have some honorable mentions that just didn't make your list?
Oh, yeah, of course. One that Steven already talked about, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I did watch this week's episode with you guys, and you guys have a lot of big fans of the movie. And I have to agree with everything they said and everything Steven said. It is kind of a foundational film for the modern slasher. Also, you really can't get that 16 millimeter film kind of grit and grime with kind of modern day cameras, even though they keep trying to do it with the remix of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But it's kind of a great, unique film that was kind of way ahead of its time in terms of gore and violence. It's more on the level of today than it is for the early 1970s. But it's a great film. So that's one of my main honorable mentions. Also, I would also say Halloween 2, the sequel to Halloween, I think is very underrated when it comes to specifically horror sequels, which we all know aren't particularly great. But I think having it pick up right away still puts you in that John Carpenter world. Although it was a different director and stuff like that, I've still thought it was a great sequel in a world where we don't get great horror sequels.
All right, Robert, you got some honorable mentions?
Absolutely. The Fly, the remake with Jeff Goldblum, it just to me better than the original. Jeff Goldblum gave such a great performance. House of a Thousand Corpses, one of the very few Rob Zombie movies that I love. It's that crazy hillbilly family that just kills people for no reason. Very much inspired by the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Just all your classics, the original Nightmare on Elm Street. I have tons of them that I just didn't put on my list. Doesn't mean they're not great movies. So yeah, those are a couple of mine.
All right, Andrew. Steven, you got some honorable mentions this week?
Yeah, basically kind of what these guys said, the classics, Nightmare, and obviously, like I said, I was having trouble not putting Halloween on my list because it's such a, Halloween might have my favorite kill, which is when that dude, even though Robert points out that it's not, it doesn't really make sense because the knife, but when he stabs that dude to the wall, that's like my favorite kill in any horror movie. But Bob is his name. Bob gets stuck to the wall. But yeah, like a lot of them movies, The Fly is, we talked about that, I think, a while back ago with something else on another list, and I put The Fly at the top of my list. Love The Fly. I'm actually, we'll get more into that maybe later, but yeah, there's too many to name. Evil Dead, Army of Darkness is my favorite. Actually, that or Evil Dead 2, but Army of Darkness is really great. Robert introduced me to that too, so.
Yeah, I got a list here. I got The Fly, Jaws, Nightmare on Elm Street, Psycho, The Shining, The Others, Saw, The Birds, Friday the 13th, and Let the Right One In, the Swedish version. So I had a whole pile of honorable mentions. I always have at least 5 every week because it's hard for me to pick 5. So now that we got down to our honorable mentions, we're going to get to the nitty-gritty here. This is going to be fun to find out what everybody's number 1 horror movie of all time or their favorite horror movie of all time, whatever criteria you used. All right, Andrew, let's get the ball rolling here.
All right. My number 1, probably no surprise to many, considering I'm such a classic film guy, is 1960 Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. For the lack of a better term, I worship at the altar of the classic filmmaker Alfred Hitchcock. Nice shirt.
Vertigo.
Nice. Yeah, Vertigo, one of my favorites as well. But Psycho is my favorite film of his, and it's one of my favorite films of all time. What is interesting is actually the first Alfred Hitchcock film that I watched. And when I tell people about Alfred Hitchcock films, I don't tell them to start with the Psychos and the Vertigos or the North by Northwest. Start with his early stuff because it makes you appreciate his Psychos and Vertigo so much more, because you realize that all of his films are so tightly kind of knit when it comes to filmmaking and stuff like that, that it's really amazing. And in Psycho, he decided to take the genre one step forward and do things that hadn't been done before, like, spoiler alert, it's been quite a few years since it came out, but killing off the presumed main character in the first half hour, which was just groundbreaking at the time. It was astonishing. Also, shifting gears from a protagonist to an antagonist being the main character in Anthony Perkins, and Anthony Perkins delivering a fantastic nuanced performance of just a psychotically intriguing person with such multiple layers of characters. And like I said, the film is astonishingly well made.
Yeah, I love your pick at number one. Obviously, I had it on my honorable mentions. I had it on my serial killer list last week. It's just such an iconic film. I could watch it every day if I had to. I mean, that's how much I love Psycho. All right, Robert, here we go. This is going to be good. I can't wait to hear this. What's your number one?
I mentioned this the last time I was on. I can't not put it on, try and put it on every list I make. It's my favorite movie ever made. The other half of the two movies I saw in 1987, Evil Dead 2, directed by Sam Raimi and starring Lord Bruce Campbell. This is the finished product of. It started out with Within the Woods. It was like a lump of coal, and then they had Evil Dead. It was like a diamond, and then I consider Evil Dead 2 a remake. It's the only way it makes any sense. And it, to me, is the perfect blend of comedy and horror. And nobody is willing to beat Bruce Campbell up quite like Sam Raimi is. He tortures him throughout this movie, covers him in all kinds of liquids. Makes him sever his hand, the iconic chainsaw hand. I mean, who doesn't want a chainsaw on their hand? To me, this is my favorite movie ever made. I've watched it so many times, people probably get tired of hearing me talk about it. So that's my number one movie.
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't such a popular movie and film franchise, they never would have been able to make a TV show on Starz, Ash versus Evil Dead. And I'll tell you what, I absolutely love that first season of Ash vs. Evil Dead. It's just so great. I mean, it was funny. It was just, there's so much going on that how could you not like that show? And I really love it. I got to watch season 2. I'm so far behind on.
It's amazing. It's great. It's even better than season 1.
Is it? I'm so far behind on TV shows and I don't have Starz, so I have to find other ways to get the shows from Starz, but I love that show. And Bruce Campbell, you're right. But how many guys can make a name for themselves in films like that and just still be relevant today in movies and in popular culture? Not a lot of people could do that. Bruce Campbell found a way to do it thanks to Sam Raimi and fans like you, Robert. So that's a testament. All right, Steven, this is going to be interesting. What's your number one?
Well, when I was talking about The Fly, what I want to say is that what I realized really thinking about horror movies a lot over the last month is that I think my favorite horror movie director is probably David Cronenberg. I really love his work. The more and more I look through his catalog, The Fly, other ones like Videodrome, stuff like that, like some really cool sci-fi horrors. And but my favorite one, and I rewatching it, I continue to love this movie more and more, and that's 1981's Scanners. Scanners is this movie that when I first heard about it, the first thing you always hear is the exploding head movie. And I think it gets thrown in that category of being just an exploding head movie. But really, it's a really cool, smart, paranormal horror movie, about telepaths that are called scanners. And basically, you could say this is like the horror X-Men movie, where you got the bad guy that has telepathic powers, played by Michael Ironside, who you see in a lot of these 80s, like he was in Total Recall, and he's got these strong telepathic powers. And basically, the government needs to find somebody with the same powers to try to catch him and his disciples. And you know, it's just a freaking awesome movie. Like some great special effects for the time. You know, the tone of the film, the score, just everything about this movie I love. Every frame of this movie I love. And it's on the Criterion Collection. It's got a cool Criterion Collection, so you know it's important to somebody that it's on that. And it's just something about this movie I love, and I think it was a movie that was ahead of its time. And of course, the exploding head is awesome. But my favorite scene of the movie is actually a scene where he hacks into a computer over the phone with his mind, and then when they try to shut him down, he makes everything explode. He melts the phone booth right in front of your eyes, and it's awesome. But I can keep talking about this film all day. It's a fantastic film. David Cronenberg, Scanners, check it out.
Yeah, I have not seen it, and there's a few Cronenberg films I haven't seen that I'd like to see. So I definitely would like to see. Yeah, all right, guys. I have a secret I need to tell you. I kind of cheated. Guys. I couldn't pick one number one. So I picked two number ones. And I think it's because they go together, and they can't be separated. They have to go together. And you know, if you guys have been picking up on the clues over the previous weeks of the horror movie, kind of horror movie month of Halloween, some of the things I've said about the things that are scary to me, and I just can't even keep my eyes open when I'm watching these films. But I try to watch them every year because they're just great films. And one of them came out in 1979, and the other came out in 1986. And one of them was directed by Ridley Scott, and the other directed by James Cameron. Both of them star Sigourney Weaver, and that's Alien and Aliens. Creepy crawly space critters that can take over your body and have hatchlings out of your body. That is the most scariest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I think about stuff like that all the time, and I just don't want to be taken over by aliens, and that's what makes me scared at night when I go to sleep. I think about, oh, please don't take over my body and hatch aliens out of my body. I mean, that is the most scariest thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
Totally understandable, Dan.
Yeah.
I mean, who wants a face hugger on them? That would be awful. Like awful. Oh.
And you know, and we talked about so many subgenres of horror films, and Stephen kind of alluded to the sci-fi genre, and I think that these two films are the epitome of what makes a horror movie a horror movie. They just happen to fit into the genre of sci-fi horror. And I just can't imagine two scarier films, or any film scarier than these two films. And they're just some of the most realistic monsters I've ever seen in my entire life. And I had to do two. You couldn't put one without the other. And so I had to put them both, Alien and Aliens. And of course, Aliens is one of the greatest sequels of all time. Anybody's top 5 list of sequels, you got to have Aliens 2 on there. Aliens, I should say. So I'm sorry, guys, I cheated.
It's okay. I did the same thing with Rocky and Rocky 2. So.
Oh, that's right. You did on the boxing one.
Even though mine makes more sense than yours, but yeah, sure.
No, I don't look at the other Aliens movies as movies. They're pieces of garbage as far as I'm concerned. These two are like one giant alien attack, and Sigourney Weaver is running for her life until she gets into that machine. And it's just let's go, bitch. And she starts bashing with this big like machine that she gets in. That's why she's able to fight the queen in Aliens. That was kind of cool. Yeah, I had to do it. I don't want to seem like I'm dragging on here, but I am. So I just want to, this whole month has been a lot of fun. I'm not the biggest horror movie fan, like I've said, but talking about all these subgenres and now tonight talking about our favorite horror movies makes me want to watch some of these movies that I haven't seen before and maybe watch some of the ones we've talked about again. I've got 3 days before Halloween, so I might be able to slip in a Halloween or a Jaws or something, or Alien or Aliens or Frankenstein or something in there, or Psycho in over the weekend. And I want everybody, if you watch this down the road, we're filming a couple days short of Halloween. Comment and let us know some of your favorite horror movies and tell us what makes you scared and so forth, and why you love this genre so much. Because I love to get the likes and the comments and so forth, and subscribe to the Best Damn Movie Show YouTube page as well. Also the Film Club movie, because we kind of share this show together. I wouldn't be able to do this show without the Film Club and all the guys on the panel. So Andrew, started with you. Where can you be found?
You can find me on Twitter at Capzilla06, as well as on YouTube on the YouTube channel page Capzilla Productions.
Robert?
Again, you can find me hanging out at Film Club. You can find me on the Facebook page, the Church of Bruce Campbellism. I am the pastor of that. You can find me on the Film Club movie show. Most of the time behind the camera. Sometimes they let me get in front of the camera and be an idiot. And you can find me here sometimes, which I hope to be found here again sometime soon, because I enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you really bring a lot to the show, Robert. I'm glad to have you. And you talk about so many different films. I know we're kind of in that horror movie genre this entire month, the 2 episodes you did. But definitely when the time arises where I'm looking for somebody with your particular talents, I'll definitely get you to come on again. Steven?
You can find me on Film Club Central, running that ship, all these different shows, Film Club Movie Show, Not Another Geek Podcast, Tromataries, Lights, Camera, News, and you can find me personally on Facebook at Stephen Billings.
And you can find me, Dan Skip Allen, on Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest. I still haven't got my Instagram back. I got to figure out what the heck is going on with that. Also, the Best Damn Movie Show Facebook page and SoundCloud.com. You can go and listen to episode 49 is up now. 50 will be up on Halloween. It's going to be our Halloween 50th episode spectacular. We're going to have 3 big interviews on there, all new original interviews with people in the horror movie stratosphere, people related to the horror movie stratosphere. And Vinny and I are just celebrating our 50th episode on Halloween. So that'll be up on Monday. So hopefully we get a lot of views to that. And I just want to thank everybody that's been a part of Carl and Andrew and Robert and Steven. We had a real good fun time this entire month talking about all these scary movies. Now we're going to move on to something I've been talking about since the very beginning. Right, Steven? How long have I been talking about this next week's episode? We got what's his face from Return of the Jedi there. He's going to pick your eyes out.
It's Salacious Crumb.
Salacious Crumb. He's such a crazy character from Return of the Jedi. Next week, we were going to talk about our top 5 Marvel films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I've been looking forward to this from the very beginning. This is 2 months in the making. We're all going to see, I hope, Doctor Strange before we do our show next Saturday. I got my screening on Tuesday. So for everybody that watches the show and everybody out there in the Twitterverse and the YouTubeverse and the whole computer universe out there, See you next time.
Bye.